Hello, good morning everybody. So today we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Liz Rosenthal, a pioneer really of immersive and interactive storytelling. Liz is the founder of Power to the Pixel. She is VR curator at the Venice Biennale International Festival and executive producer of CreativeXR. She draws on her extensive experience in business development for cross-platform and immersive content. And she will discuss today future scenarios for immersive media markets. How will XR bring new opportunities for the media and the entertainment sectors? Or will the economic impact of our current crisis change the market trajectory for different forms of immersive tech? She's definitely a very inspiring lecturer and mentor to boost the digital potential of creators, institutions, and media business. She's speaking at really major events, including the Cannes Festival, Berlinale, Screen International, TEDx, BAFTA, many more around the world. So I'm very much looking forward to Liz to bring her insights to our virtual stage today. And I just want to add a little note when we talk about XR, extended reality. This is also the emerged terms for all immersive technology. So we will use immersive media, immersive technology, XR independently. And Liz, obviously, because of her core expertise, has a light focus on the VR, virtual reality. But that's it. I think I said everything. Please, Liz, now the stage is yours if you want to say first words first before we go on to your charts.
So hello everyone. It's really wonderful to take part in this. So thank you AC and Joanna for putting this together. So as AC said, I'm going to be talking around the markets for immersive content, or what is known as XR. Something I'm particularly interested in is evolving business ecosystems for new formats of media. And I think it's something that's super important because when you're working in innovation, there's nothing that's templated. Everything's evolving very fast. So it's very important keeping a handle on how things are changing, who's financing projects, who's distributing projects, what the whole picture is looking like. So today I'm going to give an overview of the distribution landscape for immersive creative content, and I'm going to specifically look at how the health pandemic has affected this fast evolving medium. So can we move to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Thank you, AC. Okay, so until recently, financiers of immersive content were in experimental mode, often investing in short-form content to help either kickstart the industry, showcase technology and hardware, and in the case of traditional media companies, learn about how this new medium will affect their core businesses. So the most common deal took the form of funding in exchange of a window of exclusivity on the headset manufacturers or distributor storefront. Often there wasn't any further planning for wider distribution, and profit wasn't a clear driver. But now the industry is rapidly professionalizing, actually proving you have return on investment and audience reach are becoming a much more important factor in financing content. So before the pandemic, a variety of distribution platforms and revenue models were emerging across two main areas that you can see in the slide. So the first is through online platforms for entertainment consumed at home or on mobile devices. And then the second is out-of-home, location-based entertainment across a variety of arts, entertainment and retail venues, known as LBE. So tons of acronyms today. So until the pandemic, LBE was seen as an important way to launch projects and to build an appetite for audiences, often unfamiliar with immersive content. It was an important way to overcome the fact that few consumers own headsets or expensive hardware or have space to run VR projects at home. Also, many of the experiences that Michelle and I see for Venice are launched in galleries, arts venues, shopping malls and festivals, and are simply not designed to be released on online platforms. They often involve complicated setups with motion tracking, haptics, theatre sets, and even actors. So can we get the next slide, please? So since the pandemic, LBE for VR is out of bounds. Real-life festivals have been cancelled, and the idea of sharing headsets in public spaces seems kind of unimaginable for the time being. There is an uncertainty also when entertainment and performing arts spaces will freely operate again. So what we're seeing now is that immersive studios are really rapidly pivoting to formats that work for at-home distribution. So today I'm going to really focus on some new developments in this area. So I'm going to be looking at the top half of the slide. And we can answer some questions about the bottom half, maybe in the Q&A, but that's what I'm going to focus on, those 5 pink rectangles at the top. So we've got the on-demand platforms, telcos, web VR, social VR platforms, which I'm particularly excited about, and the festival space, which I'm particularly excited about. So before I do this, I think it's really important to explain what I mean by immersive content formats, otherwise, as AC mentioned, called extended realities or XR. So I've defined them by 3 different types. Augmented reality, where 2D digital information is layered over our physical world on a mobile or tablet screen. The most famous example of this, of course, is Pokemon Go, the game. But AR has mostly been used by advertisers and retailers. And we don't often see high quality storytelling projects in this space due to the limitations really of the devices and the user experience. But on the screen, I have 2 examples that I think are really top quality projects. The first comes from Canada. It's East of the Rockies that was released last year, and it's based on a novel by one of Canada's most famous authors, Joy Kagawa, and it's on the subject of Japanese who were in Canada during World War II and were put into internment camps. It's a very beautifully designed iOS app, and it costs about $3. The second is Wonderscope. It's a kids app that's been designed by the studio Within, who are based in LA, and it's very beautifully designed because it's voice activated and it's for kids, so for kids from the age of 6 upwards, and it's to help them with reading. So it has a look at feature through the app, so the look of the kid is activated with the character's eyes, so it's really responsive and one of the best AR apps I've seen. What I think is really exciting is how this whole area is growing. With CreativeXR, the content accelerator program that I executive produce, we've just selected the projects for this year, and there's actually 2 really interesting AR projects. I can't mention their names because we haven't announced. They're actually developed products that are beautiful products that are collectibles to go with AR apps that you can project entertainment onto. So it's the idea of a stage that in the form of a pop-up book. So it's really interesting seeing, how a crisis creates new formats, always for artists. And in this area, definitely the case. So the second reality is mixed reality, which you experience using glasses, allowing you to go around and interact with 3-dimensional objects that are superimposed into the real physical world. Examples of mixed reality glasses are Microsoft's HoloLens and Magic Leap. Both are designed for enterprise sector and mostly used to increase productivity, training, and simulations, but they come with a very high price ticket. HoloLens costs $3,500. They're not really suitable for consumer use, and most of the creative projects we've seen developed for MR are prototypes shown at festivals. Next slide, please. So, mixed reality, ready-to-wear consumer glasses are coming. An example of one of the forerunners is Nreal, a Chinese company, which will launch hopefully later this year. The device will connect to Android phones or a small computing unit and will feature hand tracking. The price tag is around $500. So this is really an entertainment device, and it's super impressive. Niantic are also releasing a smart glass that in partnership with Qualcomm, the chip manufacturer. So seeing the limitations of the phones and Pokemon Go, they're really excited about developing their IP for these new types of smart glasses. Something I saw in China last year, which was a prototype, which I thought was really exciting, was a kind of cardboard headset of mixed reality for Apple ecosystem. And so it's a young creator, inventor, who's created a bridging device because Apple's not going to come out with their headset until about 2023, the MR glasses. So it costs, when he launches, it will cost around $100. So it's quite an exciting way for the developers to get their hands on Apple ecosystem and test mixed reality. Next slide, please. So the third reality, of course, is virtual reality, which disconnects the viewer from the physical world. There is a huge variety in the types of experiences and consequently modes of distribution. So we tend to categorize them as 3 degrees of freedom experiences and 6 degrees of freedom experiences. So 3DOF is where there is no interaction and the experience is linear. So, for example, the 360 documentary, The Daughters of Chibuk, which was the winner of our Best Story Prize at last year's Venice. 6DOF enables you to freely move around, interact and participate in the story world. So there are many different types of 6DOF experiences. For example, there was a title, Alinea, or The Line, an interactive 6DOF animated title which won our interactive prize in Venice last year. It's a standalone headset experience that you can play at home. It was just released on the Quest last month. Then there are more complex multiplayer experiences, such as We Live in an Ocean of Air, that are made totally for galleries and for locations. They're pretty complex in their setup. This one has 6 people where you're wearing backpacks, computer backpacks, and headsets, and you're wandering through a virtual forest together. So it's multiplayer. Next slide, please. So I'm briefly going to look at the state of the headset market, and I'm referring to a report published by analyst CCS Insight just a couple of weeks ago that stated that the health crisis has prompted more and more businesses and consumers to adopt VR. They expect fewer than 9 million extended reality devices to be sold globally in 2020, but it's up 22% from a very weak market in 2019. The outlook looks very promising in 2020, with sales accelerating, 2021, and also looking at the numbers in 2024, it's 69 million units altogether, and the total that they predict will be made up of 55 million VR devices and 14 million MR devices. What happened during the pandemic is that consumer demand completely outstripped supply. People ran out to buy headsets, and unfortunately, it coincided with a disruption in supply chains. So, for example, the Oculus Quest headset, which is highly in demand and has suffered shortages since its launch last year in May, was almost out of stock throughout the stay-at-home period, which is kind of a shame because in a way it's like suddenly people are seeing a need for VR and there just weren't the supply of headsets. What's going to happen is 2021 sales are going to pick up, supported by new arrivals of devices. Everyone's always waiting for the new iteration of models because things change so fast, and the clunkiness and the inaccessibility of VR, it's changing. When you look at a headset like the Quest, it's just so easy to set up. It's mobile, it's not tethered. And we're always waiting for the next devices. So there's going to be a new Quest in the next 12 months, and the same, there'll be a new Sony PlayStation VR headset that will go with PlayStation 5 console. Next slide, please. So VR may not be in the hands of mass consumers for a few years, but it has a successful resume beyond gaming and entertainment in several fields. It's been used to treat war veterans overcoming PTSD, by doctors to perform intricate surgeries, and by as a mechanism to prototype almost every vehicle fabricated in the last 2 decades. Over the past 3 months, as I said, many companies have made quick decisions to embrace XR technologies that deliver business continuity to production lines and other operations. So these are the many, there are many examples of such adoption, and these are just some examples. So manufacturers using XR for remote prototyping, product demonstrations and remote field service to maintain equipment, companies training their workforces through XR, hospitals deploying devices to allow remote care of patients in infectious wards, and universities teaching medical students at home. Next slide, please. So And one thing I wanted to mention was about 5G. Telecom operators around the world have noticed the positive effect of the technology in attracting customers to 5G networks in South Korea and China, where 5G is the most advanced. So VR and MR headsets that are tethered to a smartphone or come with integrated 5G are an emerging class of device which will have great potential in the future and a clear use for consumers. And in the next 3 years, CCS expects that it's actually the VR tethered devices that will dominate sales because these mixed reality smart glasses aren't really ready yet. But the sales of 5G smartphones are projected to surpass 1 billion in 2024. So if you think about that, if these telco operators tend just a small proportion of their customers to try out XR and bundle packages of headsets with their subscription service, it will really boost the overall adoption. So we're also, of course, waiting for those lightweight, easy, ready-to-wear glasses that we know that Apple, Facebook, Huawei, Microsoft and Samsung are working on. But that's probably going to be in 2023, 2024. So next slide, please. So when it comes to entertainment, games have been by far the most popular segment of the entertainment business. So a report published in February by Investor, the Virtual Reality Fund, made the case that 2019 was a significant inflection point for the VR industry. So from data from all the major VR storefronts, Steam, PlayStation Network, Oculus and Viveport, they estimate that a total of 106 VR games have exceeded $1 million in revenue. And nearly half of that came from 12 months from the publishing of the report, before the publishing of the report. And this is a very significant figure because it means that VR is repeatable, the success, and it's no longer just a developer's playground. It's actually a platform offering real opportunity. And that was back in February, so it'd be interesting to see what the figures are after this period of lockdown. So returning to the entertainment world, a new business ecosystem started. With multiple opportunities for revenue generation. So we're starting to see distribution and sales companies forming. There were quite a lot of French companies that came into the sector. For example, French distributors MK2 and Wide, who are in the film sector, started acquiring and licensing VR projects over 2 years ago. Then there are outfits like Divergent Cinema, a French VR LBE servicing company that started their distribution arm around the same time. And then there are outfits like City Lights that licensed Eliza Knit's Project Spheres for a record sum of $1.4 million a couple of Sundances ago. And then interesting new companies like Iconic Engine, a licensing company owned by Digital Domain, specialising in licensing content to telcos. So next slide, please, AC. So I'm just going to quickly go through these 5 sectors and give you some examples of projects and what's happening on them, on these different platforms. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with on-demand platforms. So there are a variety of online platforms that distribute VR. The most widely viewed are those owned by headset manufacturers, Oculus and PlayStation, and games platform, Steam. So there was a great increase in sales on the Oculus store with the release of Quest. They said last October at their last developer conference, they had reached $100 million of content sales, with 20% attributed to content sold on the Oculus Quest. Just a bit about licensing. If you pre-sell, if someone pre-buys or acquires your content, generally they would do that because there's talent attached or there's a claim from major festivals. Generally, people will ask for a window of exclusivity on their platform. But if a platform offers to distribute your content without a minimum guarantee, it's normal not to give exclusivity, and the revenue split is generally 70-30 in favour of the rights holders. There are also loads of self-publishing possibilities like Steam, YouTube 360 and Facebook 360. Just in terms of figures, Anton Kehol, who's the co-founder and producer of Atlas 5, outlines some ballpark figures he's come to expect from 3 different types of licensing deals for a premium VR work. So a period of exclusivity for 6 months should earn a 6-figure sum on pre-sale. An acquisition for continental exclusivity should earn a 5-figure sum. And finally, an acquisition for continental non-exclusivity, a low 4-figure sum. So just let's look at some of the formats and their price points on the storefronts. Until 2019, most independently produced content we were seeing applying for Venice was short form, often 15 minutes or less. And we've seen a huge change in the length and complexity of projects. In our last edition, many works were 30 minutes or more, and we had several installation experiences that were around 45 minutes to an hour. And also a number of projects that had 2 to 3 hours of gameplay. So here's some examples of prices. So Gloomy Eyes, which is a 30-minute premium content animation, which won tons of awards last year, and Colin Farrell is the narrator, is $7.50 on the Oculus Store. Vader Immortal series, which came with the launch of Quest, this is premium content, is $30 for 3 episodes. And then indie title Pagan Peak, which we showed in last year's Venice, which is a cinematic escape room game based on the German TV series, is $10 on Steam, and that's around 3 hours of gameplay. So next slide, please. Telcos are perfectly placed to help scale VR distribution with their large consumer base. So far, these are some of the companies who are licensing content. So Orange, Deutsche Telekom, the Korean companies LG, SK, and Chinese companies, China Mobile and China Telecom. So Iconic Engine, I mentioned before, a specialized sales agent to telcos, has a library of over 250 titles that are mostly acquired at film festivals. They say that the travel-themed, dialogue-free, so especially high-end animation with no dialogue, and space-themed are genres that work really well for telcos. And they're expecting to get between $3,000 and $20,000 for licenses of work. And the periods of licensing tend to be up to 12 months, so they're quite short. The web is a great platform for creating an experience in VR. It's easy to share content broadly across continents and cultures. So Mozilla engineers built the foundation for WebVR API with a goal to give content IP owners a simpler way to support a range of viewing options without having to rewrite their code for each platform and device, which is basically happening at the moment with VR. So instead of creating a VR app that users have to download, which creates friction, a WebVR experience simply exists on the web, just like any other website. All the customer has to do is navigate to the site, plug in a headset, and they're good to go. So just an example of a company that is working in the entertainment space is LucidWeb. It's a wide label service which provides audiences with a unique URL to make your projects immediately available on all devices. And also it's interesting to look at Within, who distribute high-end VR content, because they were only doing this through an app, and now they have a web VR platform. So an area that shows huge promise is VR social platforms. The COVID crisis has accelerated the exploration of VR social platforms as ways to work, share, play, create, experience culture, and coexist remotely. There's an explosion of options available for business purposes, socializing, events, music, and other performing arts. So what VR offers that Zoom or other conferencing apps don't is a strong sense of presence. Working, playing, sharing together through avatars in a virtual 360-degree environment provides an experience of a realistic gathering within which interactions feel much more real and complete. So most social VR platforms offer the ability to choose and edit avatars to represent what you want to look like, what you want to be, to varying degrees. Some are very realistic, which I think are a bit creepy because you get that kind of uncanny valley feel, and some you can choose crazy characters and you can make your own avatars. So it's kind of fun deciding who you want to be embodied as. Businesses are obviously using tools to improve employee productivity and collaboration, but I think that is a huge benefit to culture and entertainment business in all kinds of exciting new ways. So instead of talking about social distancing, a term we're using now in the VR community is the words remote presencing, and which is a lot more positive. And I'm sure Michelle's going to be talking a lot about this next week. So just to mention, there are a multitude of different platforms, new ones emerging every week, and they all have different features and levels of accessibility and user friendliness. The most established social platforms are VR and VR Chat and Microsoft-owned Altspace. Other ones I wanted to mention are the Museum of Other Realities. It's an immersive multiplayer art showcase in VR where you can connect, share and experience virtual reality art with others. So made for the space artworks, not artworks that have been put into the space that have, traditional artworks from galleries. So it's an absolutely beautiful space, but again, suffering from accessibility issues because you have to have a headset to go into it. So this platform's been used for a number of festivals recently. Another platform I wanted to mention is called Wave. It's the creator of the world's first multi-channel virtual entertainment platform for live concerts. So real live artists are transformed into real-time digital avatars, cast onto a virtual stage, built with stunning visuals and customized interactions that fit each artist's unique style. So the concert's called Waves, and they're working with pretty big stars. They've had over 50 waves so far. I also just, moving on to the next slide, I wanted to show some examples of specific performances or events, or the new types of things that are being invented for this space. So last year we showed a project called Love Seat, which when we think about it now, it's so forward thinking for its time. It's by a director called Kira Benzing, and it presents a new notion of theatre which combines real world performance and virtual audiences simultaneously. So last year we obviously had the performance in a real space, and you can see, I think from the picture, the actors are wearing headsets. But they're also fully tracked, motion tracked, and they appear in a virtual space with virtual audiences. So there were two types of audiences for that work. At the moment, a lot of these new types of works are happening in social platforms where actors can perform from all over the world, embodied as avatars, and be with audiences who also can participate in the performance in crazy spaces. Another thing I wanted to mention was Finland's annual May Day celebration in the capital of Helsinki, which was cancelled because of COVID-19. The city has paid for a virtual Helsinki space that's taken 3 years to build already, and they actually hosted the event in this space, and 12% of the country actually watched the event, which is a huge number. It's the biggest VR virtual event that's ever happened. 150,000 out of these 700,000 people who viewed it went on to create avatars of themselves to participate. So just moving on to, and also I just want to mention there was a Jean-Michel Jarre concert staged in VR Chat that happened on the 21st of June that was created with Vroom and paid for by the Ministry of Culture in France. So thousands of people joined that gathering of him playing live he's embodied into the VR Chat space that Vroom designed. So lastly, I want to mention film festivals, who are an important launchpad for immersive projects. So of course, most film festivals have been cancelled, and for the major film festivals, it's been really difficult for them to bring the idea of glamour and exclusivity and red carpet and world premieres and this sense of occasion to the small screen. And I personally think VR offers a really interesting opportunity for social interactions, live events, and premium events. And I really think, flat screen festivals could really use virtual tools to bring a sense of presence and occasion. For the VR festivals, we've all started creating virtual events. So the first one really that created a proper virtual world was the Go East Festival, where they built a really stunning depiction of one of the festival's venues. So they were showing VR in VR, and it was built into VR Chat. Another festival was VR Ham, who built an exquisite and surreal space into the Museum of Other Realities. And CreativeXR just had its, CreativeXR as part of the Cannes market, just happened in Museum of Other Realities, where they exhibited work. And of course, Venice. We're going to be announcing very soon what we're going to be doing in this space, but I can't mention anything just yet, but we're particularly excited about looking at these new forms of art that we could have never imagined before, where people are going to virtual worlds together and being in impossible situations that you couldn't do in the real world. So I'm really excited about what's going to be happening in the future and how we're going to represent Venice, our beautiful island of Lazaretto Vecchio, in a virtual world. So thanks very much for listening.
Wonderful. This is great.
That was an absolute rush through.
No, it's wonderful. I think I want to take it from actually the last part you were saying, that we were talking about the fact that because of social distancing and remote workforces, but also the festivals, there will be an acceleration in the growth of immersive XR collaboration coming up. I think the estimates of the ABI report, which has been published like 2 weeks ago, are like 400 million by 2025. So my question to you is, being as part of this ecosystem, Liz, in different roles and ways, which place do you see for truly immersive event experiences, maybe for the professional context? Right? If we see the forecasts, I think Tony Parisi, the head of XR ad innovation at United Technologies, was saying like 50% of live events attendance will be virtual. So what sort of a forecast do you have yourself? Is the film VR place where it all started and it will spread and we will have this immersive experience coming into the professional world?
It's really interesting because it's really where there's a need. It's sometimes where the biggest innovation and invention happens. So I really think in a way, we travel so much for our work. It's fantastic meeting people all over the world, but our carbon footprint is absolutely terrible in the entertainment world. So it's an interesting thing of thinking, are people going to travel as much and are we going to be doing things virtually? And I personally, I'm so fed up. Sorry, I'm not saying this, I'm fed up with Zoom and doing a conference today, but it's really hard when all your interactions are through screens and flat screens. So it's kind of exciting, the idea of doing something that has more value, or a sense of space, or a sense of presence where you're actually with people. So I do see, it's going to create much more rich experiences for virtual, for remote presencing. So I do think we're going to see a lot of events. I mean, for example, Glastonbury, which is one of the biggest music festivals in the world. Part of the organisation of Glastonbury, they're doing a huge event this weekend called Lost Horizon, which is the biggest, they say it's going to be the biggest festival, music festival and arts festival in virtual reality. And it's kind of interesting just seeing how all the different entertainment entities are starting to come into it. I would say the film, for film festivals, how could they do, you could do exclusive virtual screenings. I mean, there's already an app, Big Screen, where you can do private screenings of films. There's all kinds of revenue models that are possible as well within the virtual world. Once you start creating a sense of presence and avatars and objects and costumes and set decor, it's super interesting what you can do. So going into, I think, some of these live events, especially music, I think we've seen quite a lot of interesting music events, the Jean-Michel Jarre concert, the Wave concerts, Lost Horizons, they're a big inspiration. But also, I think, what are performing arts venues and entertainment spaces going to do now? And now, Michelle and I have looked at some very interesting work the last weeks for selection. We're just in the midst of selection, where you start seeing possibilities for organisations now to strategically think how they're going to create performance, how they're going to bring people from all over the world into these worlds, whether they're a recreation of their actual venue, if you want to scan, for example, the National Theatre, or whether you want to go further and create a venue where you can kind of do anything. So that's what people are, all kinds of ideas. And so obviously for business use, it's obvious. There are so many new virtual business apps for collaboration. I mean,
I would love to. I would love to stay on the business side. And by the way, thank you to my great team, which is actually posting all the links so that you can really dig into this a bit further. Thank you so much. I would like to stay on the business, revenue, etc. I mean, as I come back to the article of Tony Parisi again, he's saying that the consumer experience is becoming increasingly immersive anyway, and we saw this with Jean-Michel Jarre, Snapchat, TikTok, etc., etc. So VR is becoming increasingly popular, and we expect to start seeing more platform offering VR-enabled products. So he says brands that embrace immersive AR and VR experience in the next 5 years will find themselves actually in the top of the 25 earners of this, benefiters of these business models. How do you see the development of advertising and marketing application in the VR field?
Well, obviously, in the advertising world has so many layers of distribution platforms. And if you think about our lives in lockdown, and if we're not going out so much, which is, we don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully, things are going to open up. There's a lot more value in what happens in screens and in virtual worlds. So I can really see some imaginative things happening in virtual worlds, where you could sponsor, or you could do some product placement. This is just one example in real world events, or depending on how things develop and what kind of virtual worlds develop. There are all kinds of possibilities, because you're creating a world basically with elements within that world that you have all that they could mimic the real world, or they could be different and do things that are way more powerful. So once you start going into these virtual worlds and trying them out, you start realizing the possibilities creatively. Yeah. And then that, business comes along with that, creative business. So I think he's probably right, because I think obviously things are really going to change the way we communicate and engage. This health pandemic has just accelerated a whole lot of new things.
That's great. I think, Joe, I think I have a link also on the future of social VR of Skywell software. Maybe we can post this too. I think there are a couple of examples that you are mentioning, Liz. And this was not even agreed with you, but this is, I think it is, I can't remember. I read so much about this, but that's great. Also, I would like to go back. I think we have a question of my Antonio Cardenas. You were also at the Reeperbahn delegation 2 weeks ago, I think, right?
Thank you for this great panel, and for allowing to ask some questions here. For me, it's really what I was writing there is like, I have the feeling that going full virtual is, I don't know if that's going to really happen from what I believe. I think it's more something where we're going to be like hybrid in presence, especially for music and things like that, where I feel the connection, or the human connection, is so valuable. I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on this, and is that something that, for example, the Venice Festival is also trying to implement, or what is it then in this?
I totally agree with you. I love real life things, and it's so hard during this lockdown for everyone to be in virtual spaces, and all of our communication comes through this screen. It's this one screen. You have your social life, you have all kinds of conversations and all your work, and it's just too much. So I totally agree. I think hybrid is what's interesting, and it's something we're super interested in Venice. The real festival is going to happen in Venice in terms of the flat screen work. Obviously, it's going to be pared down because people can't travel. So what do you do in the meantime? And I think that's what's really important for creators and financiers, is to think of how you can create projects that can exist in both spaces, or a combination of the two together. And I totally agree. And that's what I would always say when you're planning your distribution strategy. It's really difficult at the moment. We just launched CreativeXR, call for entries, during the pandemic, and we changed it all because we noticed last year a lot of the projects were completely location-based, focused, which had their problems of their own because they couldn't scale. And so this year we can't take really things that are purely location. So on the call, we told people to get creative. And they did. It's amazing how creative they got with their projects. So a lot of them have ideas that can be virtual, in real life, virtual, or a hybrid, or they have different formats that work. Or they've come out with, I mentioned this AR, the idea of an AR and a product that's a collectible for home use.
Yeah. Liz, I would love to come back to your core competencies as a distribution strategist. And we have seen something with, evoked in an article of Kent Bae, the producer of the Voices of VR and the Voices of AI podcasts. And he published a great article, and he's mentioning that the immersive creators embarked in the same festival run strategies that in the film industry, meaning, oh, let's go for a festival run for a year, and then we will go and monetize and distribute and etc. It seems that it has been, in the VR industry, it has been taken over from the film model, so to speak. There are a couple of exceptions. Sometimes Felix and Paul, for example, they just do the launch on a festival, and then they'll use this as a press, a PR platform, so to speak. But you, I mean, you are a mentor, you are an expert in these fields. What would you also, in your role, what would you recommend to the aspiring XR talent for their distribution strategy, actually?
Well, very good question, because this is a very young format, and looking at the festival, all the different festivals, obviously I'm going to say Venice is the only one of the A-list film festivals that has an official program selection with proper awards that are in line with feature film awards, which is a big deal for VR. So you get a lion, the same as what a winning feature film would get. So the Biennale, who runs the Venice Film Festival, is basically saying this is a new art form. It has as much value as cinema. So I think it's really important to think about where you show your work and what value it's going to give you. And it's, there are obviously key festivals where people see things. Sundance is one of them, even though it's a sidebar event, it's not an official program, but it's important for people because it's US press and loads of people gather there.
Oops.
And Venice. But I would say, sorry, I've just seen my internet is a bit unstable, it says. Tell me if it goes...
You were briefly interrupted. If you can just repeat your last sentence, I think we're all good.
So Venice, going into that, Venice is the only official competition section of a major A-list festival. And also it coincides with a moment that's very important if you're going to publish on a storefront, which is, you're talking about Felix and Paul, the Atlas V projects, they're going to publish in storefronts. I'll talk about that in a second, because Atlas V has a very different strategy to Felix and Paul. So what's very good about our positioning is that we're just before we're in the fall. And that's when, of course, a lot of the works that's being financed but a big title is being financed by the headset manufacturers. And they're interested in product launch and product sales, which is always for Christmas period in Western companies. Obviously, I'm sure for Chinese, where they're a whole massive market, it would be maybe around the Chinese New Year. But for us, it's that period. So it's actually a really good time. It works well to premiere, because we only show premieres of work at Venice. That's what sets us apart. And I've talked to headset manufacturers. They said, this is great timing because we're going to launch product, in a month for Christmas period. So because there aren't that many platforms for distribution, that's really important, is the manufacturer's storefront windows. But also something I want to talk about that's really important is press. Is going back to this, is that because this is a new form, we don't have a lot of really high-end critical and cultural commentary on this new format. Often it's talked about as tech. And so this is really important for consumers to see value in something when a work is written about in a kind of critical way, where people are reviewing a piece of work. So something we did in Venice last year, we held the first forum for the art of reviewing VR, where we actually it was a group of critics who were, we had 3 film critics, and Kent Bae, who you just mentioned from Voices of VR, who's one of the most experienced writers on VR, and probably one of the only ones who covers everything. He looks at VR from a social and cultural and a technological point of view. So it was a really interesting discussion. So, what happened in terms of, what is this art form? How are we going to benchmark it in a reviewing way. That's a very important thing. But going back to your question on distribution, when I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of these projects are not ever going to be released on storefronts. They're not publishable. They only can work in real life locations or in festivals because they're kind of, they've got kind of some kind of physical or hybrid element, you know, that Antonio was mentioning. A lot of projects we're seeing require a set, or they're just not built to be for stores. They're built to be played on the spot. In a real, because they're quite too complicated, they're not publishable. So what do? Then there's only the festival distribution, but then there was this whole layer of in real life distributors, people like Diversion, who are doing planning distribution for the projects they take on in real venues. So that could be performing art gallery, you know, performing arts venues, galleries like the Phi Centre in Montreal, which has become a really important place where work is shown. And, you know, VR, very high-end VR work. And there are sort of venues popping up like the Saatchi Gallery, which showed We Live in a Nation of Air, some big museum venues. So there was a whole distribution run for those projects. Then, you know, the Felix and Paul model is the kind of pro game. Well, games are different because they don't tend to be shown in festivals. So we're seeing a whole lot of new games that I'm very excited about that are really adopting narrative into interactivity, and they're beautiful, amazing cinematic worlds. But the festival for more artistic projects, that's the place that people are hoping to get into and show their projects, and now with the pandemic, it's quite difficult. So I think people are rethinking, how do I create an installation in a virtual space? How do I combine create completely new formats?
Yeah, they have to be more creative, even though.
I'm just going to jump in here because we have another audience question, kind of also building on this with this from the perspective of user experience. So Astrid Kamke has asked, what are the most positive and possibly surprising experiences that you've had while visiting a festival in VR or in general that you've seen kind of out and about? And are there any things that you would rather avoid in the future? So it's a little bit like do's and don'ts of VR festivals maybe. And yeah, in the sense of a good user experience for this.
Well, I think the main problem at the moment that everyone would say is accessibility. And the problem is that it's really hard for people to go to some of these spaces. So one of the do's is probably choosing a platform that if it's going to be a social space, I think it's think about your needs and your goals and choose your platforms according to that, because all these platforms are different in terms of accessibility. So, for example, VR chat, you can go in on the Quest. It's very important because a lot of people who are not geeky, like myself, and don't own. I've just actually bought a gaming laptop, and because I need it, because I can't get into places, and I've got a couple of headsets that have been loaned to me. But the problem is I think accessibility is key, and that at the moment, a lot of VR is for VR people anyway, and it's got worse in this period because people are going into spaces that normal consumers can possibly imagine how to get to, and they can't get there physically because they don't have a headset. So I think if you're going to do anything social, you need to do something in a space that's accessible to people. So something like VR chat you can get on the desktop PC as well, and you can go into the Quest. But then it's really hard when you want to design something. I mean, you can design worlds in VR, but it's very hard to put 6 degrees of freedom apps, which VR experiences are, into VR chat, unless you build it into the actual world, because you can't execute a 6 degrees of freedom file in a 6 degrees of freedom app. It's very difficult. It's something that will come in the future. So, for example, Museum of Other Realities, absolutely beautiful space. So I would say, I'm sure Astrid was at that event. So very last minute, they built a space in Museum of Other Realities. And it was really impressive what Ulrich and his team did. Ulrich Straff is the director of VRHAM. But it was really difficult because doing live events is hard. It's a beautiful exhibition space, the Museum of Other Realities, I would say. Whereas VR chat is more built for social and events and streaming media coming in and out. So going back to Astrid's other question, the surprising things, because I only really started going to social things in VR in the last few months. And it's kind of funny because you go into a space and you mimic the way you are in real life spaces. So it was funny, Michelle and I were at a festival, I think we were at the Go East Festival. Actually, it was the Go East Festival, and we got into the entrance because you get spawned in your avatar and you arrive and you search for the world you need to go to. You arrive, and we were standing in this, there was a narrow kind of alleyway to get to the main festival area, and we were standing there and everyone was waiting behind us. Instead of just teleporting, you can go anywhere, they were actually queuing behind us, and I thought that was really funny. And then I went off to have a private conversation. Joanna Popper from HQ was there, and then in the same way you would in a networking room, someone came up behind me and said, "Hi Liz, is it okay if I talk to you?" And I went, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I'm having a conversation, can you wait over there?" So it's really funny. I don't know, I think my conventions will change as I get used to it, but it's really amusing seeing how these things happen. But what I love, and it really is amazing how even with very basic avatars, I mean, the avatars are an issue. It's like being able to change your avatar is so important. So that's another thing that I would say actually is really important, is being able to choose what you want to look like. And so you go into VR chat and there's a library of characters. I didn't really want to be any of them. There's either for manga characters for girls, and then there's superhero characters, and there were a couple in the public library. You can build your own if you're a developer, but I can't do that. I need to get someone to do it for me. But then Kira Benzing, who's created Love Seat, the project I was talking to you about, that we showed in Venice, that's already playing with these ideas, but she used the social space last year, so she was way ahead. She took up Michelle and I on this tour around VR chat, and we went to this avatar gallery, and we had such good fun, choosing all these different avatars they had in the library. And something that is really amazing is what it does to you when you can choose who you're embodied as. And it's really interesting, because it's sense of scale. In the avatar gallery, you can be a can of soup, or you can be a massive giant mushroom. And so when you're a giant mushroom, everybody is tiny and you're huge. So your experience in the world is different. And then people are designing things like flying mechanisms within worlds. It's incredible. So great fun.
Wow, Liz, thank you so much. It was a great overview. I don't want to close it now. I want to leave it open for another 5 to 10 minutes so that everybody can connect with each other. It was really great overview, market figures, but also other perspectives on how beyond festivals, it's going to go further with the immersivity.